Hello and welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture what we will do is that we will learn about the different types of layout in Android which can be used to design our user interface. So we have not yet discussed about the layout. So in the previous lecture we were actually using relative layout, but the thing was that we didn't actually know how this layout actually worked and how to go ahead and design a particular layout. Now, designing layout is one of the most important parts which you need to learn while creating your Android application, because how you place things next to each other or how you place things on your layout is extremely important to know. And henceforth, in order to know that, or in order to understand those concepts, first of all you need to understand the different types of layout. So in this section what we will do is we will discuss three types of layout. The very first type of layout which we are going to learn is going to be the linear layout, in which elements are actually placed in a linear fashion to each other. Then in the next lecture we will learn about the relative layout, which we have used here. And relative layout is actually a layout which places elements in relation to each other. And then finally we will learn about the grid layout, in which elements are placed in a grid fashion. So without wasting any time, let's directly move ahead and jump onto this lecture and study about a linear layout. So first of all, what we will do is that we will delete the code which we have over here, which is basically the edit text and the buttons. So make sure that you have a clean layout over here. And as you could see, now we only have one tag in our layout in our XML code, which is the relative layout. Now there are actually quite a lot of things which might confuse you over here. So what we will simply do is that we will change this relative layout to a linear layout. And what we will do is that we will delete the entire things inside it apart from these few things. Now the next thing which you need to do is that you need to understand that you need to set up the layout width and the height for your particular layout. So in this case, as we are using the linear layout, you do need to set up the width and the height of the layout as well. So you type Android layout height, and the layout height is going to be equal to match underscore parent. And what match parent actually means is that match parent means that it is actually going to fill up the maximum available space to this particular layout. So considering the height, as you could see, this is the available space. So when you actually set up this equals to match parent, that means for the height it's going to fill up the entire screen. And same is the case with the width as well. So I'm going to type in Android layout width, and it's actually going to be equal to match parent as well. So once this thing is done, we are pretty much done designing the linear layout. And now the next thing which you need to do is that you need to set up an orientation. Now let's understand what orientation actually means. So as I mentioned, the linear layout is actually used to place elements in a linear fashion to each other. That means a linear layout is a layout which displays its views next to each other, either vertically or horizontally. So for example, let's say you add up a view over here. Let's say you add up a button over here. So when you want to add another button, that button gets added right next to the previous button. So what we will do in this case is that we will set the orientation to be horizontal and see how the buttons or elements are going to be placed. So we will type Android orientation, and let's say that's going to be horizontal. And now let's go ahead and add a button over here. So I'm simply going to type in button, and I'm going to specify the layout width as wrap content and height as wrap content as well. So as you could see, you have a button here, and now let's specify the text for this button. So let's say the text is button 1. And now when you want to add another button, what you need to do is that you simply need to type in the button tag, that is going to be wrap content, and as you could see, as this is a linear layout, the next button actually gets added right next to this particular previous button. And that is because the layout which we are using is a linear layout which actually places elements next to each other, either horizontally or vertically. Now it's actually placing the elements horizontally because we have specified the orientation as horizontal, but if you change this thing to vertical, then it will actually place elements next to each other in a vertical fashion. So that's the main reason for understanding the orientation of the layout. So when you specify this as a horizontal, it is actually going to place elements next to each other in a horizontal fashion. And if you actually make this vertical, then it's actually going to place the elements next to each other in a vertical fashion. Now let's go ahead and add some text to this button as well. So I'm going to type in, let's say, button 2. Now what we will do is that we will simply copy the buttons and keep on pasting them, and we will see how these buttons are going to be placed. So as you could see now, the entire row is actually filled up, and when you keep on adding the next button, as you could see, it gets added over here where we can't have a look at. So what you could do in this case, when you actually want to fill up, when you actually want to place more buttons, you could simply change the orientation to vertical, which is actually going to place these buttons in a vertical fashion. So now let's go ahead and try to design something using the linear layout. So let's say you want to basically design the user interface for an email sending program. So in that case, you will need an edit text over here, which is going to basically accept the email address of the receiver. Then you are going to have one more edit text over here, which is going to accept your message. Then at the end, you want a send button over here. So let's try to go ahead and design that using the linear layout. So the first thing which you need to do is that you need to set the orientation to vertical. Now the next thing to do is that we need to add an edit text over here. So we type edit text, and let's say the layout width is equal to match parent. And when you set the layout width equal to match parent, that means it's going to fill up the entire width which is available to it. And let's say the height is going to be equal to wrap content. And now what we will do is that we will have some hint over here, and let's say it says enter email address. Okay, so once we have this thing, we have successfully designed this particular edit text. Now one thing to note here is that, as you could notice here, the edit text actually starts right from the left and right from the top of the layout, and the reason for that is we have not specified the padding for the linear layout. So padding is nothing but it's actually some sort of space which you leave from the top and from the sides. So what you could do is that in order to make your layout more attractive, you could go ahead and add a padding to your layout as well. So you go in the linear layout tag and type in padding top and set it equal to, let's say, 10 dp. And now as you could see, now we have some space over here at the top. You could also do the same thing for adding the padding at the left as well. So let's say the padding at left is 5 dps. So as you could see, now you have some space over here as well. And let's add the padding to the right as well. So we will type in padding, and that should be actually padding right. So padding right is also equal to, let's say, 5 dps. Okay, so once we have padding, as you could see, our layout actually looks more attractive. And now let's go ahead and design the rest of the elements of this particular layout. Now once you have this edit text over here, let's go ahead and add another edit text for the message. So we will specify the width as match parent and the height as, let's say, wrap content. And let's specify the hint as well. So we type in Android hint, and the hint is going to be enter message here. Now once we have these two things, the final thing which you need to add here is going to be the button. So we finally add a button over here, and the layout width is going to be wrap content and height is going to be wrap content as well. And now let's specify some text onto the button. Let's say this thing says send, as we want to basically send the message using this particular button. Now if you could notice that here, as you need to type in the message over here, as you could see, there is insufficient amount of space for this particular edit text, and that is because in this edit text right here, we have specified the layout height as wrap content. So in order to fix this issue, what we will do is that we will use a property which is called as the layout weight. So what usually happens is that whenever you are making the linear layout, all of the views in our basic layout take up just as much vertical space they need for them. So what we actually want to do is that we actually want to make this field stretch so that it almost takes all of the vertical space in the layout that is not being used by the other views. So in order to do that, what we will do is that we will use a property which is called as the layout weight. So what you need to do here is that you need to set up the layout weight, but even before setting up the layout weight, you need to set the height of this equal to 0 dp. and now you could set up the layout weight. So you could type in Android layout, and that is going to be weight, and let's say this is going to be equal to 1. So as you could see, when you specify weight equals to 1, the text field actually expanded and it took up all the spaces which is not required by some other views. So as you could see, now we have everything set up here, but the only issue is that this hint, which is enter message here, should not appear over here. Instead, that thing should appear right over here at the top. So in order to bring this thing to the top, what we do is that we use a property which is called as gravity. So we type Android, and that's going to be gravity, not layout gravity, that is going to be just gravity, and we set it equal to top. So as you could see, when we set the gravity of this thing to top, this thing actually moved to the top. And now let's go ahead and align this button to the center of this particular view, center of the screen. So in order to do that, we use the property which is called as layout gravity, not gravity, and we basically place it at the center. So as you could see, now the button has been placed at the center, and that's how we are successful in designing the layout of our application. So that's all about it about the linear layout, and I hope you guys were able to understand how we could go ahead and design the linear layout for designing the template for email sending application. So basically, a linear layout is nothing but it's actually a layout which places elements in a linear fashion horizontally or vertically. So if you want to arrange elements vertically on your layout, you just need to specify the orientation of the linear layout to be vertical, and if you want to place the elements in a horizontal fashion, you could specify the orientation as horizontal. And then finally, what you could do is that you could keep on adding elements to your linear layout. And one thing to note here is that when you keep on adding elements to your layout, the elements actually appear in the order in which you type them in the XML code right over here. So for example, for this email address field, we have specified the field over here. So as this thing is typed in first, it's going to appear first in the linear layout as well. So the order of typing things is important in linear layout, which is one thing you need to remember. So that's it for this lecture, and I hope you guys were able to understand how linear layout works. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next lecture. Thank you.